All right, welcome back, everybody. We're going to get underway. And following up Dan's presentation, we're lucky enough to have Mira Srinivasana with us, who's a senior product manager with Oracle. And one of the requests that we get quite a bit at the Institute are folks are always curious on the tools that are out there, what type of benefits they provide, why do I need them, all these kinds of questions. And BPM Institute's position on this is while you can get started with BPM with butcher block sheets on the wall and Visio and a lot of other different things, as those efforts start to mature and you start integrating end-to-end processes and processes across different departments, there's some basic fundamental technology enablers that you're going to need. Things like a common repository to put some governance in place. Are folks modeling processes consistently across the enterprise, and a lot of things related to the execution engine and compliance with BPMN 2.0, those types of things. And so those things will basically at some point become undeniable. So you have a choice of trying to bolt things together, do some homegrown, or look for solutions that have them integrated. But I think the exposure to the state-of-the-art technology that's available and how it can support your efforts is valuable. We have recently held some workshops similar to this in Chicago just about a month and a half ago, and things about the support that it gives you in documenting requirements and capturing that for the business becomes some real tools and assets that you can use. And so I've not yet seen this demo on 11G, and so we're looking forward to that. And please give me a nice round of applause for Mira.
Yeah, hello everyone, and great to be presenting in front of you. So Dan was speaking about the barriers to success in the adoption of BPM and how Oracle BPM Suite 11G can put you on the right track. So I'll just start with 2 or 3 slides, and then we will go into a live demo on the capabilities and the various features that are that are in Oracle BPM Suite 11G that support those themes. Moving on to Oracle BPM Suite 11G. So what is in that product? So we have a modeling tool, of course, it being a BPM platform. So there are 2 modeling tools, in fact, role-based, secure, web-based, business user-friendly modeling platform called the Process Composer. So Process Composer just facilitates business users to participate in a common understanding of the business processes, empowers the business user to model the business processes in a Visio-like fashion, and also in certain cases be able to make some amount of implementation choices and design as well. The second modeling tool is BPM Studio, which is based off the Oracle JDeveloper platform, and BPM Studio is an IT developer tool. So Process Composer is meant for business analysts and business users, and BPM Studio is an IT developer tool, and it is a unified design time environment for not only modeling processes, but very rich user interfaces and business rules and BAM dashboards and all kind of services that together make up this composite BPM application. And both Process Composer and BPM Studio, they promote a shared collaborative work environment and are connected by a common BPM repository. So a business user can log into Composer and can create a high-level process flow or a detailed process model and publish that to the repository. And an IT developer can then come into Studio and take that, check out that particular process model, and he can start implementing that process model and take it to execution, as well as create any surrounding BPM assets like user interfaces to deploy that BPM application onto a runtime. So we have looked at modeling. Now moving on to the runtime. So BPM has runtime, a single unified runtime, just like you have a single unified design time. So this is the theme that Dan was referring to around unified BPM foundation. So we have one design time and one runtime, and this runtime can cater to all kinds of processes, whether it is human or decision or content or system. And so basically what you have is a workflow engine inside that runtime. You have a rules engine component inside that runtime. You have a BAM component inside that runtime, and the BPM and native execution engine as well. Okay, and then we move on to the next layer, which is the process analytics. So you can, as a business user, when you're creating a process model, you can actually specify business indicators, interesting data that you would like to capture at various points in your process. As you're modeling, that's just another additional modeling step that you need to do, to kind of specify what you need to capture as business indicators, and automatically those become available to you when you go into BAM or the out-of-the-box workspace to be able to create your own custom dashboards. And that's very powerful because you don't need to know any coding. You just use wizards to create those custom dashboards. Then on top you see is the collaborative work management portal for process participants, basically business users who participate in the actual business processes, to be able to carry out their work effectively. So we provide them the right information at the right time, and provide a lot of collaboration capabilities so that they can carry out their work knowledgeably as well as effectively. So one a point worth mentioning is the Oracle Fusion Apps, which is the next generation Oracle applications, uses BPM for all their process needs and for their workflow needs. In addition to Fusion Apps, there are also other products like Oracle Web Center, which is our next generation portal platform, which BPM itself uses for the collaborative portal. That same product uses BPM for its approval and workflow needs as well. So you can see that we eat our own dog food, and the adoption of Oracle BPM is very pervasive inside the Oracle product ecosystem as well. Just two more slides. So one of the concept that you need to understand is around BPMN 2.0, business process modeling notation. How many of you are familiar with BPMN 2.0 or BPMN standards? Okay, so that's good to know. So so the current version of BPMN is BPMN 2.0, and BPMN 2.0 offers not only it's not only a Visio-like graphical process modeling notation, but it's also execution friendly. That means that same process model you just overlay with execution details, and then it becomes an executable model, and you can deploy it on a native BPMN 2.0 runtime engine. And that's exactly what we are doing in our life cycle, and that's what exactly you will see in the demo. So what that facilitates is business models in BPMN 2.0. IT developer implements that same BPMN 2.0 model, so they both see the same graphical representation, and at any point in time, you can exchange the model. There is no loss in translation. They are both pointing to the same model, and in the repository, so you can go back and forth between these business analyst tool and IT developer tool many times without any loss of information. And that's one of the big value proposition of BPMN 2.0 is it's not only a modeling language, but it's also an execution language like BPO, and that's pretty powerful in terms of business IT collaboration, in terms of eliminating the business IT gap. And so you use the model, the BPMN 2.0 based modeling, and BPMN 2.0 based modeling for analysis, meaning for simulation, the same model is used, the same model for implementation, the same model is deployed and executed, and the same model is what you see in your collaborative work management tool when you're actually running and working on different steps in the process. So this is exactly the demo scenario that you're going to see. So there are various stakeholders. So we will start with a typical BPM project. So a business analyst or a business user would go into the process composer and will start modeling the process, and we'll show you how collaborative and easy it is for a business user to get started on that. And once he does that, then he's going to save it, and automatically that gets published to the repository. And then a business analyst, so the business process, the business analyst will then the IT developer would then pick that model, check out that model in the BPM Studio tool, and do some amount of analysis, namely simulation, by specifying some cost and performance properties, and then do that simulation for throughput analysis or activity-based costing to arrive at an optimal model. In addition, the IT developer will build all the implementation artifacts to support that BPM application. And then this we are showing that this is continuous iteration during the process development lifecycle, because the business analyst can publish the models at any point in time, even if it is version 1, and there can be many versions that can be published. The IT developer similarly can work in parallel with the business analyst and save those changes back to the repository so that the business then can get a newer version and look at some of the changes that IT has made, make some more changes from the business side. So this is very collaborative in nature. And then in the demo, we are going to look at how once you deploy the process, then as an end business user, you and as a line of business owner, you can go to the the collaborative work management tool, carry out your work, and also do look at the dashboards and perform more analysis and identify optimization areas and feed that improvements back into the model. So you could just are talking about continuous iterative process improvements here. So I'm going to log in as Jay Cooper. So Jay Cooper is a business analyst, and this is the home page of the process composer. So you can look at various views of the project. So some projects could be favorite, and and you can look at all projects view. You can look at projects that are owned by you, etc., or projects that could have been shared by other people with you. So there are various views into your projects. And what you see here is in fact a snapshot of your repository for which you have access to. You see various folders, and you see a catalog of projects here, and you have sophisticated search mechanisms to search for projects based on tags and names, etc. The next step that Jay Cooper is going to do is he's going to the process that we are looking at in this specific demo scenario is the sales code process. Okay, so I'll show you the process model and explain to you. So the first step is going to do is he has to do some amount of changes. So the process is already in place, but he's just doing some refinements. Okay. So this has landed us on the project page, and the project page is pretty business user friendly. You can see that the project is currently in edit mode. So because he's acquired the lock on the project, and it is shared. So talking upon this aspect of collaboration, at any point in time, if you're the process owner, you can go and add more stakeholders to participate in the process modeling activity. And some people can be viewers, and some people can be editors, and of course you can make others owner as well. So if you're a viewer, you get to view the models in the project, and you get to provide feedback for change management perspective. And if you're the editor, of course, you can edit. So and also you can see there are some interesting things on the right hand side. So you can see all the notifications, like who has changed what in the project, and if you expand that, it will tell you what has changed in that BPM project, what processes have been changed in that BPM project, etc., and by whom. And there's also this easy way to create versions. So you can automatically create versions by just selecting the plus sign and giving a meaningful name and for that particular snapshot. And at any point in time, you can revert back to a previous version, open up a previous version, or revert back to a previous version. And then also in this project, there is the concept of the BPM role. So there is the notion of process participants and the concept of BPM roles, which are basically logical roles. So these logical roles will have to be mapped to your physical LDAP users or roles later on when you do your deployment. So you could make some changes there as well. So let's, and there are other interesting things as well that I would like to draw your attention to. You have this concept of approvals. So every time a process is undergoing some changes, like you're creating a new version, you're going to deploy it for execution, you want some kind of governance in place. And this project approval workflow will actually allow you to create the workflow to be able to put in those governance in place. Okay, so let's just I've opened up a process model, and so what you see here is a BPMN model. So you can see it's very flowchart like, Visio like graphical model, and there are some swim lanes on your left hand side which are basically the BPM roles that I just mentioned. And just I'm going to take 2 minutes to explain what this process is doing. So it's a sales code process. A sales representative is coming in and entering a quote. So you can see that there's a sales representative swim lane, and in addition you can see that there is a human step. So this is the event. The circle symbol represents a BPM and event, and then this is the human step where the person is going to enter the quote in the system, and then some set of business rules have to be evaluated. So you have a business rule step that's going to evaluate the quote approval policies as to who should be the approvers for the specific quote. And then you have gateway. So gateways are basically decision points in your BPMN model, and there are different flavors of gateway. Whether you want to take only one and one outgoing path, or you want to do you have parallel outgoing paths. So depending on that, you have different flavors of gateway. And so here we are checking whether the business practices review is required or not, and if it is required, you go ahead and go forward to the business practices review step. If not, you take an alternative path and you directly go to the approvals. And that brings us to another gateway. So the gateway that you see here does not have an X in the middle, but it has a plus symbol. So that represents a parallel gateway, which means that both approve deal and approved terms have to be done in parallel and concurrent fashion, and the end of that scope is activated only when both steps are completed successfully. Okay, so here just to show an example of what a BPMN model would look like, and then you can also see some feedback, some paths going back in a reverse direction to previous activity. So what's happening here is every human step has some associated user interfaces, and in addition it has this notion of an outcome. So an outcome basically tells you, for example, if somebody is approving, so there are various outcomes to that human step. It could be approve or reject or redo or something of that nature. So here we are checking on one of the outcome and saying if it is rejected, go back to a previous step, refine it, and do it again. So just to give you what a BPMN process looks like. So how do you create this BPMN process? It's very simple. You have a BPMN palette on your right-hand side, and so we have a basic palette, a top-level palette, and then a full-fledged sub-palette here. So so the basic palette basically shows you that BPMN consists of three main constructs. Task, for doing any process step, is represented by task, and gateways are meant for decision points where you want to branch off or merge or join parallel paths, and events are had great value in BPMN, and events can be generated by the process, and other processes can listen to it, or events can also be subscribed to by this process. When I mean subscribe, it can be received by this process, and and that could change the flow of the process. Okay, and then the measurements basically are the business indicators that I was referring to. I can place it at any point in my process, and then say I want to measure this data at this point in time, and automatically the runtime would do that for you. And notes are as very useful to business users to be able to specify more details about the product, about the process. So in addition, if you are the viewer, then you have this additional documentation capability as well. So you could actually provide feedback in the form of documentation, and that would then become what's referred to as change management. So here I can say more, and now it opens up my sub palette, and I can see that there are different kind of specialized activities. And you could, as a new, as a business analyst who's just using BPMN for the first time or who's new to this tool, can start, with this abstract activities at the beginning, and then you can always, change them to some other activity by just the click of a button. Okay. And there's also the concept of validation. So there is different kinds of validation, and this will help you and guide you through creating a semantically valid business process model that's based on BPMN. And in addition, you can see if somebody else is holding the lock and all of that. So there's one other concept before we go to the IT tool. This is the concept of a business catalog, and that highly promotes collaboration. So so what that empowers is for business and IT not to not only exchange processes but also BPM assets that go along with these processes. So every step in a BPMN process is abstract, meaning it is just a visual indication, and you need to associate it with some implementation artifact to make that concrete. And we'll show you how to do that when we go to the IT tool. So for now, just it will suffice to understand that you have these business catalog which shows you all the implementation assets that is there in that BPM project. It can be reused across BPM and processes. Okay, and with that, the moment I save these BPM and process models, it gets automatically updated to the repository. We'll move on to the IT tool. So, one of the theme, that, Dan mentioned was around user-centric design. So we saw the process composer as, helping the business user, the business analyst to be able to participate and collaborate with various stakeholders to empower the business users to kind of take control, to model those processes, right? So the user-centric design doesn't stop with the business user. It also, kind of extends to the IT developer. So from the IT developer point of view, they want to be able to be very agile and be able to change with changing business requirements. They want to be able to also have wizard-based, modeling, environment so that, they don't have to write much coding and quickly generate, artifacts and use coding to a bare minimum. And that's what the BPM Studio actually facilitates the IT developer to do. So we saw the BPM composer, and one aspect that I didn't point out that I would like to point out is both in composer as well as in Studio, we can import Visio models as well as models from other other EA tools like Provision and Telelogic, System Architect. So all of these we can import Visio XML models and XPDL 2.0 models to create these BPM and 2.0 models and BPM projects at any point in time. So if you already have Visio models, as a first step to doing collaborative process discovery, you can reuse them, and then refine them to meet the BPM and semantics if there are some issues. Okay. So what you see in here is the BPM Studio, the IT developer tool. So I'm changing roles here. I'm not the business analyst anymore. And you can see here that the same model that the business analyst within the composer, whatever they have published, is what the IT developer also sees. In addition, the IT developer has refined that model by adding a few steps here and there. And you can see that there is a BPM and palette. And BPM and 2.0 has this different conformance levels for people with varying knowledge of BPM. And so you have a descriptive palette where there's only a subset of BPM and activities. And then for analysis, and more detailed flow, then there's a complete BPM and palette, which is the analytic BPM and palette. So also, in addition to implementing, another important thing that can be done here is around simulation. So you can analyze a particular process or a set of processes using simulation. And basically what you do in simulation is specify some assumptions for time and cost parameters and for the number of people, and you can start running your simulations. And in this case, I'm going to make it fast and probably also end the process. So to create a simulation model, there are many ways to create a simulation model. I can provide assumptions. I can also create a simulation model from the runtime. So I can just create a model and say new simulation from runtime data, and it would go and fetch the actual running data, and then I can query and also kind of slice and dice what sets of runtime data I want to actually bring in, because it might be that for 80% of your customers you're meeting your SLAs and meeting all the KPIs, but for 20% for a specific industry segment or something, that's some SLAs are not being met. So you want to only bring in those particular instances, playback and run simulation and do simulation comparisons, right? So we do have that closed loop BPM, and we are wizards to auto-generate those simulations as well. So here, going into the simulation, what I can find out is I can find out what are the bottlenecks in my process, and so look at where the time is spent, in what process steps, so I can actually drill down from my process into my process step. And then usually the bottlenecks are the user tasks, so I can just say I just want to see the user task, where the bottlenecks are. And you know so all of those kind of give you indications on what process steps need to be improved. you know. So that's what this helps you to get to. And once you have your simulation, you can compare your simulation scenarios, you can export it to Excel spreadsheet and do all kinds of analysis there. Also, you can see here that there is the same business catalog that I showed in Composer has come inside Studio as well. And this promotes the shared collaboration between business and IT. And to implement the process step, all you need to do is just select the properties and go to the implementation tab. And in here, you can browse and reuse existing assets. So if it's a human step, it has to be linked to a human workflow implementation artifact. So here I can browse and kind of pick the right implementation artifact, or if I don't have one, I can just add a new one, and that automatically gets added to my business catalog and becomes a shared reusable assets. The same way, I recollect that there was a lady here who asked about how do we do integration, system integration. I have so many packaged applications in my organization. How do I bring about that? So here you can just right click on your services, and I shown you a subset of adapters, but Oracle has over 300 plus connectivity solutions to be able to create those services. In addition, going back, you can overlay your business indicators, as I mentioned before. So I'm just showing you. So in the case of a sales code process, I'm very interested in seeing what my discount is for the various types of quotes. And I also want to slice and dice that quote across industry sectors as well as revenue dimensions. And I want so all I've done is just created these and at various points in time, I'm taking a snapshot and saying I want to kind of measure this at this point in time in my process. Likewise, I can have counters that measure the number of time a particular path is traversed, under what conditions, etc. And these are useful when I do my process analysis, which is my next step. Okay. And in addition, you can also look at how your processes are collaborating with other processes, what kind of messages are exchanged across these processes. And this is, in fact, a BPM and collaboration process diagram view that you're seeing here, because it's a process always communicates with other processes, and this shows the message exchanges across these processes. With that, we will move on to our collaborative work portal. So let me just, so as a business user, I'm logging in. I can, what you see here is a collaborative work management. So now my processes are deployed, they're up and running. And the next step to doing it is actually going and triggering that process instance. So I can open up a form from right here and get it up and running. In addition, there are other interesting things that I would like to draw your attention to. So not only do you see the list of to-do items that you as a process participant have to do, you also have links to applications, BPM applications that you are triggering. You are the initiator for those applications. In addition, you can view other stakeholders who are actually collaborating with you on completing that task. And also you can look at a list of to-do items, and your business calendar is basically synchronized with your process calendar. In addition, you can look at some notifications happening in your process instances, some interesting discussion forums. So there is some there are some tips on how I can use my process spaces for collaboratively working. So I mean that's very interesting to me. Then there's a sales code approval policy related discussion forum, and I would like to also understand what are the latest changes to approval policies. Also, there are documents, and the process spaces that you see is also embedded with the UCM, which is the Oracle Content Management product. So it's kind of embedded and available to you. So I can, store my documents as I am working on task in that content management system. I can also refer to documents that are already there. So all of these, lead to a very collaborative, rich collaborative experience. So I can also look at my dashboards, and as code, this is very, very relevant, because you might want to, when you're giving discount, you might want to see how your end of the quarter performance is, and if you're not meeting quota, then you might be incented to provide more discount. So providing this metrics, relevant metrics, the relevant time, so that the person can work on a step. So, I mean, assuming Jay Cooper has gone through and created a task, the next step in the process, we are looking at a scenario where, we want to, show some agility, or some change that a business owner might have to do. So, I'm logging in as Jay Stein, and Jay Stein is actually the process owner, the line of business owner. And the reason he is, logging in is because, he has received some notification regarding the SLA violation, and he would, he wants to go back to the process spaces and look at what's kind of violating, and let's go ahead and see and what he can do. Any questions while this is coming? Okay, so Jay Stein also sees more or less the same view. In addition, he also sees some other processes that he's participating in, and he has received a notification, and based on the notification, the approved deal for Intel has violated the SLA, and he wants to go and look at it more closely and see if he can take some corrective actions. It's a high deal account, meaning about $1 million. So one thing, in addition to the process spaces that goes across in process instances, there is also an instance-specific collaboration space that you can create on the fly. So this is all about social BPM. So he can just create this a separate space for collaboration for this specific instance, and this is highly useful when you have ad hoc, unstructured processes that require a lot of collaboration and very rich content around it. And here we zero into that process instance, and he wants to investigate why this process instance is taking longer time. So it shows a detailed audit trail, and you can drill down to see what was the input, output in the process, and you can also look at the graphical view to see what path this particular process has taken and where it is pending, etc. So then this line of business owner can, because he has the right privileges, he can actually, approve on behalf of other business users, because he's the owner. So he can just select run, and then, make it go to the next step and approve. In addition, he also has the privilege to alter the flow of a process. So often when your processes are running, build for change is a very, very important capability that you want to build into your processes, and also consider when you select a BPMS platform. So what this build for change means is that you should be able to introduce some changes to your already running process instances. There could be exception scenarios, that could be system exceptions, some systems being down, or there could be business exception kind of scenario, or even when you're modeling, you didn't take care of a particular flow, and that has happened, and you have to take some control in some form or fashion. So of course, the easy thing is to suspend your process instance and do some kind of manual recovery. That's available too. There is also a special feature called the ultra flow feature that again, it's all around the concept of user-centric design, helping the user to participate in making dynamic changes. So in the ultra flow feature, as if he has the right privileges, he can control the process flow at any point in time and move it back to a previous step, skip certain steps, provide new data to the process at any point in time, and this in turn introduces a lot of agility into that process. It's a very powerful feature. So he can make that, and that was what I was planning to show as part of Oracle BPM Suite 11G, and I would like to take up any questions that you might have. Yes. Yeah, very great question. So Alterflow can be applied to a batch of process instances, and we provide some API for it. Plus, you can do that in here as well. You can select a batch of process instances, and it doesn't change the model. So it just takes a runtime copy and then makes those changes. So in your audit trail, you will see like new paths in your process that was not there in your original model, so that you do have governance around why those changes have happened and who has made it, etc. Yeah. Your KPIs, of course, will continue to be measured, and for certain process instances, if they skip those steps where you're measuring certain metrics, then of course there would be some loss of data going into your KPI. So it does affect the KPI. So that is there. But these are highly recommended for situations where you need to do some kind of recovery and you are left with no other alternative but to do this, and you don't have the time to re-implement and redeploy your process. One other thing that I would like to draw your attention on that point is the concept of the unified foundation. I mean, we have talked about it a lot, but just for you to see it, So this is the IT developer view, the BPM developer, and it's still very friendly. I mean, if you look at this, navigator, the BPM navigator inside Composer. So if you want to look at the SOA view, how does this look like? You can always select that. If you're an IT developer, you would appreciate that what you see in here is actually a SCA composite. It shows you, now this is like the real IT developer view, where you can see your BPM and process and different human workflow services and some system services like SafeCode, which actually goes into the Oracle e-business system, and approval rules, which are business rules. So basically, our BPM is layered on top of the SOA. So just you can and the BPM Studio is just a layering on top of the SOA navigator. So all the human workflow, all the system connectivity, the ESP, everything is at your disposal. So you're not only building business, you're not only supporting business empowerment, but at the same time, for a real the world deployment, it's not just a departmental solution that we are referring to. It's an enterprise strength BPM solution powered by Oracle SOA. Any other questions?
Thank you. In the IT developers environment, obviously you're going to have some changes to the process as a result of, maybe there was a process that looked like one activity to the business user, but from an IT perspective, maybe it has to be decomposed into many, many steps.
Mm-hmm.
When that's performed in the IT environment, since it's being performed on the same underlying model, I assume you're still looking at the same model.
Correct.
Are those changes hideable to the business view? Because from my business perspective, I don't care that it's 18 steps. I still want to look at it as though it's one task.
Yeah, it's a great question, and we call it selective filtering. We call that feature selective filtering, and we have an embedded subprocess that we recommend that you use, so that it becomes like a compound activity, and you drop all the activities, so you can collapse it and you can expand it as desired. And currently, we don't have that feature in the version that I'm demoing, but that's upcoming in a future patch set. In that, you can specify certain scopes as IT only scopes, so that business doesn't go and tamper. They can expand it if they choose to, but it's always kind of collapsed, and it has a special symbol indicating that it's meant for IT. Yeah, you could do that.
There's also the business process guides too, right?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for pointing that out. So we do have this milestone-based layering on top of business process model called activity guides. And what that activity guides help you to do is to overlay a guided process path, like a milestone-based approach. Because for business users, they don't care sometimes about whether a quote is going into e-business. That's not their concern, but they're more bothered about what steps do I have to perform, or what other steps does my other participants are performing. So you want like a milestone-based approach. and that can be created inside Studio as well as the Composer. And automatically when you go into process spaces, what you see is a guided milestone approach, and it will show you, how much percentage of that milestone is achieved. Yeah.
And also, last one, how much support is there for end user process documentation during runtime? For
Mhm.
example, what the process owner is developing this process, and there might be 30 pages of detailed instructions on how to complete this task. Is any of that part of this? Is it available to the end users?
Yeah, so the documentation that I previously showed, it has two flavors. One flavor is just for feedback and change management that we call as internal way of communicating across the different stakeholders. And then there is also this other documentation, which is end user documentation, mostly procedural documentation of steps that they would need to follow, and you can link to documents and content management system. So not only can you do that in your runtime, but you could do that even when you're collaboratively doing process discovery. You always have these documents and you can link, and once you specify something as end user documentation when you're modeling, automatically in your process spaces, in the task form when it comes up, you see like a globe kind of help symbol, and if you click that, those documents and those details kind of show up.
I have just a follow-up question. You already touched on it earlier when you had the stacked view in the IT developer. And it's also related to my previous question, just to have a sense of the magnitude of what back-end applications that you connected to and what other services you're building while you're building this model. So if you could go to that view again and just give us an idea about how many backbone systems that you connect for this simple flowchart, because sometimes it's kind of more complex and deeper than that, but at least for this one,
Oh, you mean like show these raptors? Is that what you?
Yes, the stacked view, and if you have a place where you can pull, are the major systems I'm connecting to, how many of them,
Okay.
and how many services that you have to build. I would assume, I'm not familiar with that, but I assume services are something it depends on you while you're modeling it. You're doing most of the part, but there is also a standalone system that you're connecting to. So
Sure.
to see the magnitude.
Okay, yeah. So the save code is a system step. So there is a service task that is, so the process model that you saw in Composer is, of course, what the business user is more bothered about and what he thinks is a view of the process. The IT developer, of course, has to kind of refine and add some of the IT kind of things around it. So one is a save code that it goes into Oracle e-business and then puts it there. And then there's a send task where you're talking to another process saying, hey, I'm going to send the code to you, customer, and you review it and respond back to me. So now just sitting on that save code step. So if you look at the way the save code step is tied to that service is, there are two steps to it. First, you create a service and automatically that gets added to the business catalog. The second step is to just link that implementation artifact in your business catalog to your process step to make it concrete. And then so let me start with the first step here. So to create an adapter service, I can show you the file adapter. So there is a wizard to take you. So you're not doing any coding here. And then you're giving a name for the meaningful name for the service. In my case, it's save code. And then you're saying, I'm going to define what kind of operation I'm going to do against this file, And so I'm going to write to the file because I'm actually saving the code. So here in my process, I wrote to a file because the e-business is in Oracle DMC network. And where is my file going to and what kind of translations I want to do on my file and whether I want to batch the file messages or not. So for a database or an e-business adapter too, it will be very similar. For an e-business adapter, I mean, are you familiar with Oracle e-business? No. Are you familiar with PeopleSoft or Siebel or? Okay, so these are your custom applications that you're referring to then?
The sense of the magnitude of how many, and I don't have to be specialized in a certain, technology you're talking about, but I just want to see like the flat process that you have right now, just as a simple person like me to know that that example you're giving, okay, it's connecting to
only
systems.
One system. It's connecting to only one system in my case. It's a very human-centric process.
Okay.
But you could, have it connect to 1,000 systems if you want to.
Yeah.
So there's nothing that prevents you from doing it, but in the
Right.
specific example, we just connect to one system.
Part of
Yeah.
our question, I think, is around the adapters and the breadth of connectivity.
Oh, okay. Okay, so we have 300 plus adapters. We have adapters for messaging middleware, including MQCDs, typical rendezvous. We have adapters for all kind of ERP, from Bond to PeopleSoft, SAP, Oracle e-business, all of this, Siebel, etc. And we have connectivity to legacy applications like Tuxedo, and we have connectivity to mainframes like COBOL, CICS, IMS. So we have partnerships with other adapter vendor providers. In addition, we provide you an adapter SDK. So if you have like a custom application, you can easily encapsulate that in a service interface, and then that becomes visible. So we have an adapter SDK toolkit that's very lightweight, and we have wizards to convert your custom end applications into services that can then participate in a SOA-like environment.
Yeah, that's very helpful to get, the inner piece that you guys compatible with a lot of systems out there and you have adapters it. But my question was very simple. For that model that you're showing, when you went to the stack view of it, it shows that it's connected, seems like, to another system and it has multiple services. So I just wanted to number of it, and just to get a sense of this small process has connected to one system maybe and 5 services.
Oh, okay. I see. So, so that's why I talk about implementation artifact. I don't call it as services. So for us, from the Oracle BPM point of view, all implementation artifacts have a service interface. Okay, it doesn't mean we go over SOAP. We use API because they're all component engines within the same runtime. So for a human step to become concrete, it has to connect to a human implementation artifact. And in fact, if you look at a specific human implementation artifact, that's a service as well. Like approve deal is a human implementation artifact, that's a service. And if you see here, there is a pattern that is there, then that particular step, it has to be, has a list of participants in it. And you can see that there are 3 layers of assignees there. The first assignee is sequential management. So the code has to be approved by a list of people up the LDAP hierarchy, depending on who's the sales rep who's entering that code in the code system. And then there is a bunch of approvers who have to approve in parallel. So you can chain all these out-of-the-box workflow patterns to create a very sophisticated set of process participants. And each of this task is an implementation artifact. So there are about 6 or 7 task implementations that I use here. The rules here is also an implementation artifact, and it has a rule interface, but we are going through API. I would like to emphasize that, to indicate that there's no performance, implications to it. So in the rule, we provide you an editor that is Excel spreadsheet-like, metaphor called the decision table, and you can come in, specify your conditions, what's your input, and what's the output across different kind of rule conditions. So this is an implementation artifact as well. So if you look at it from that point of view, every step is in fact tied to an implementation artifact, and but the system implementation artifact in this particular sample is just one. That's a safe code step.
I wanted to just follow up with it. So from the BPM Studio, can you see a list of all the services for this process?
Yes, from BPM Studio. So when you mean services, are you just referring to system services, or are you referring to any kind of?
Can you show us when you went to the BPM Studio and open it up, can you show the list of the services that are connected for this? That's
Yeah.
what we're asking.
Okay. You want the composite view. Okay,
Yeah.
we call it this is the set of services that, all of these are services.
So where did that list come from? Is it dynamically, when you said you created the service, it's giving the business, going to the business library, that dynamically created that list? Or
Yeah, so this you didn't have to create, it got automatically, created.
Is it tied to the reference architecture?
What reference architecture?
Is it tied to a reference architecture?
Yeah, it's SCA. Service component architecture is the architecture that we adhere to in the Oracle BPM product. That's our SOA platform is based on SCA architecture. And so just to, kind of go one step further so that you're really clear is, so all implementation artifacts, as you keep adding, they all get added to the catalog. And the way that composite gets generated is with each step, then you go and link by going to the implementation tab. So that's where you do the linking of that implementation artifact to the process step. And automatically, you get this high-level composite view which says that this process, request code process, is linked to all these, implementation artifacts that have service interfaces. And so you get to see this composite view is auto-generated. Of course, you can add here, and then automatically you will see that in the catalog, but somewhere you have to link it to a process step. So it's more natural to do that here. In most cases, you don't even have to go look at the composite view unless you're an IT developer and you want to do some, more like, IT level analysis, then you go in there. Did that answer your question? Any other questions? Yes?
So I just have a question more on the practicality and less about the tool. What has been your experience with your customers in your implementations that the sync between the business and whoever the IT group is keeps these processes up to date? I mean, it's obviously a tool that you use when you're very mature, and you even use the word project. And in my experience, what I've seen is that people are very ambitious when there's a project, and then the project ends and the team disbands and the artifact is left ungoverned and is out of date shortly thereafter.
So let me just give you a brief description of how our customers adopt the Oracle BPM 11G platform. So there has to be some level of governance to be built in order to kind of convert your BPM project into a program so that it lives through and people follow some best practices. So several of our customers, to begin with, they pick out a project that they think they can use to communicate the value to the business, the one that's more of a pain point, confined to one or two departments, not too ambitious to begin with, and also to be able to select business indicators that they think would be of interest to whoever is the stakeholder, usually an executive level stakeholder. So once they see the benefit, then they expand that into a program. So so the repository is in essence has governance mechanisms like approval workflows, version support, and change management, and check-in checkouts. At any point in time, only one person can hold a lock to an asset. So all of that is kind of built into the repository, and that I wouldn't say just repository alone ensures like 100% asset governance, but that goes. And in addition, we have another tooling called OER, Oracle Enterprise Repository, that integrates with this platform, which is actually an impact analysis tool. So you kind of publish that to OER, and OER will tell you what's the dependencies. And OER can harvest from other kind of Oracle products and other product solutions as well. It has hooks for you to harvest all those information. So yeah, to cut the story short, so you need to have some kind of best practices and some kind of governance policies in place in order for your project to grow into a program and be adopted in a big way. And in addition, what the tool does is basically once you have that best practice policies, the tool provides you hooks to implement those policies.
Yes, but what is the success rate of that? Of those in your experience with your customers? Because yes, the tool has that all built in, but in practicality, how often beyond the project, beyond the program, does that truly exist?
Yeah, so we, among our customers, we found like 60% or 70% do a good job, and in fact, most of them have like at least a virtual BPM center of excellence. Somebody who's going to spearhead, be an evangelist within your organization, who can actually say that this needs to be followed, and also has he or she should also have authority to be able to, I wouldn't say authority, but at least some kind of influence across the different organizations who participate so that it's implemented. So we have seen customers who do this kind of due diligence upfront more successful than the others, and people who just do this in a very ad hoc fashion, don't have a long-term vision usually kind of suffer. So I would say 60% we have seen very good, and we have methodology too to kind of help customers, to migrate from a project tactical kind of a department level solution to gain initial wins and buy-in, to migrate to a more program and governed kind of enterprise-wide BPM deployment. So we have a methodology to guide our customers through those steps.
I think the big thing is that they establish governance up front, right? Because that's the whole thing. You're talking about when it's not there, then things just kind of go into chaos of sorts. But many companies understand sort of the value of doing that up front. And if you do, then you have a process for change. So, invariably there needs to be a change made to that some point in the future anyway. Then if you've designed governance, you know how you're going to make that change. So, the way to basically not fail is to just establish some measure of governance. It can be pretty simple, right? You've got responsibility assigned and you go from there. But that's kind of the key.
Hi. When you show the bottlenecks, are you able to see visually at a glance where the bottlenecks are?
Yeah, I just stopped the animation, but you could see the animation. You could, when you, do the simulation, you could actually see, things, the queues being accumulated. So you could see those places where it is red. That's where the bottlenecks are. So here, or yellow is just on the verge. So here, I think in this specific process, I increase the resources so I don't see any bottlenecks. But yeah, the red things that are accumulating here, those are indications that there are bottlenecks, and I can just click and add resources. So if I'm doing some kind of a resource allocation scenario, like I want to find out how many people I want for a particular role, and this role could participate in different processes in different capacities, then I want to be able to do one of two things. The recommended thing is to use some kind of business rules to bypass some of the human steps. That's most ideal. But where you cannot do the bypassing, then you basically opt for increasing the number of people for that role.
So you can change the rules on the fly during runtime. But what about if you want to have some sort of governance where you had the approval stages when you're introducing new services, etc.? Is there like a sandbox environment?
Yeah. So you're talking about playback testing and all of that, right? So in Studio, and it's not there in Composer, but it is coming soon in Composer. By the way, this simulation that we're showing in Studio is coming in Composer in the next release. So an analyst need not come to the BPM Studio tool at all for doing modeling and analysis. That's the intent. The playback, you can kind of say a specific process step as draft if you have not implemented it, because the way usually it works is when you are a business analyst, you want to model out the entire process. You're not modeling in piecemeal, thinking about how it's going to be tested. But when it is handed over to an IT developer, that person will then do in a piecemeal fashion, implement certain steps. You don't want to try to test out the entire thing. So there is this notion called draft. So I can mark any node as draft, and automatically that kind of dummies it out. And then I can do playback and step through testing. But I wouldn't be able to make changes to rules while testing if that's what you were talking about. I'll have to redeploy again. But what I can do is I can mark activities as dummies and then bypass them. So I can do incremental or testing of partially completed BPM projects.
One more question. You mentioned about the catalog. Since it resides here, that means the business owner cannot make changes to the catalog. Is that correct?
So the business owner can make changes to the catalog, meaning At modeling time, yes, you in Composer too, you can add things to the catalog. So if you look at the Composer, we didn't touch upon that, in the interest of time, but a Composer can not only do modeling, you can also do some implementation within the Composer if you have the right privilege. So there is the concept of a catalog, and you can define human implementations right inside the Composer. You can define your rules inside the Composer and edit it and do all those things. The only things that you can't do in the Composer is the system level. The adapters are not embedded in the Composer. And you can do simple data association, but not very sophisticated XPath or XSLT. Okay, so Composer in some sense is a subset, a very business centric view of the modeling environment. So it's a subset of what you see in Studio.
And appropriately so, because then IT
Don't want
needs
to
to add those,
overwhelm.
yeah, those capabilities as well, right?
So quick follow-up comment and 2 questions. So quick follow-up comment to your question. I just wanted to share that in the company I've been working for, the way we've made it work, we weren't using the system, but the way we made the whole BPM model work was we split our governance, starting with a higher level governance. And then once it became a reality, we split into an operational subcommittee that was assigned beneath that governance. And typically the governance assigned people to be on the operational subcommittee, and they were responsible for keeping this up to date and only bring it to the executive level when things needed huge change. So it became part of their day-to-day job. So that worked pretty well. Quick tactical question, and that is, if we've been using Provision for a lot of years, how messy or elegant is it to import or translate or whatever the word might be? And the second question is there any kind of Lean Sigma or statistical templating or quick analysis for variation from SLA and alerts and things?
Okay, so let me answer the first question. That's much simpler. The reason I mentioned Provision in the first place was because we've tested against, for multiple customers, and call this a magic menu because it's kind of sometimes very difficult to find it. So you can import your model, and basically that you can point it to. So Provision has XPDL 2.0 export, but that Provision XPDL 2.0 export is very Provision specific, meaning there are some customizations that Provision has done, but we have a translator. Basically, we have embedded a utility called Business Process Converter that can understand Provision XPDL 2.0 format and bring that into BPM and 2.0 model. So we have been successful in bringing those Provision models, for several customers into the BPM suite.
So it translates graphically and the reference libraries and also the flow lanes. It translates it?
Yeah, so what you get inside here is the BPMN model for that Provision representation. That's what you get in here. So if Provision is pointing to some application, because Provision is an enterprise architecture tool, so it would refer to services, maybe business services. I'm not familiar with Provision, but I suspect that it will do that, an application system and then a software system. It will be linked to some objectives and KPIs and all that. So those cannot be brought over. It's just a process model that is brought over.
Great, thank you. And the second question?
Yeah, so the second question is around Lean and Six Sigma. What kind of support have we in the product? We do have support the concept of SLAs, and we do have BAM to measure those SLA violations and to take corrective actions. So what we consider as, we don't have any statistical, our simulation is based on statistical analysis, discrete event simulation, but we don't have, a specific lean kind of analyzer built into it. But lean is about, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's about bringing up the quality and bringing the number of errors down as much as possible. So just the fact that BPM lends itself to continuous iterative process improvement, I think fits very well with the lean philosophy. So given the fact that we support analysis and the closed loop BPM, where you can bring in your runtime back into it and then do some comparisons and then redeploy in a very agile fashion, so that itself, I would say, supports Lean Six Sigma. Did you have any other things in mind in terms of Yeah, no, we don't have any of those.
That was my question. Does the simulation, like, does it export out to like something like Minitab or any other kind of statistical package that'll interface to it?
It currently only exports to Excel, and it generates reports which are HTML. So it doesn't export it to Minitab currently.
Yeah, then I personally I would disagree with what you said though, that BAM isn't, that doesn't
BI.
meet lean to
Which one?
me. I said BAM wouldn't meet lean, the lean, I would disagree with that putting in BAM and just getting that, because lean is much more around Six Sigma statistical processing.
Yeah,
Much more deeper dive into that analytical packages and stuff. So I don't know if that. would
sure. So in
agree with
addition, in addition to BAM, we also integrate with BI. So when you look at the studio, so there is this concept of process cubes where all the process metrics are residing for you to do analysis. And so one sink is going to be like BAM. The other sink is process cubes, and these cubes basically are views that integrate with Oracle, out-of-the-box views that integrate with Oracle BI, business intelligence, as well as it integrates with third-party BI tools as well. So I'm not sure if that, again, I'm not a lean expert, or I don't understand lean much, but I'm not sure whether the BI would be a good answer to that lean kind of support.
I'll give just a quick example of what we did in our company to kind of marry these two concepts together. We work on a BPM division or group. At the same time, one of our major focus area is Lean Sigma. So we kind of map them together to see where PPM can support with all the technologies and tools that it has, where it can support Lean Sigma. So like the DMake, when you want to define, if you have already a mature system like this that shows you all the KPIs, all the metrics that's there, you can use that in the define phase. And when you come to measure, if you have a meaningful matrix and stuff like that in your PPM, then you can use that. And in the analysis, I can see the simulation you can benefit from the simulation to kind of see where the bottlenecks are and how the value stream is going and stuff like that. And that can help you in the analyze phase. And you carry on when you control also, you might come up with new changes to your process, and this is kind of a dynamic environment, so you can come back and implement those, future state, stuff like that into your model. And then definitely BPM will help in the control part of things. You take it from there and you set up your KPI correctly, you set up all your metrics and dashboards correctly, so that will help you actually from the Lean Sigma part to kind of manage and control your process. So that's kind of the level we try to do.
Okay, so basically then, if I understand you correctly, so BPM will feed in the right data needed for you to do that kind of lean analysis. And then you would do the analysis itself outside the BPM platform.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, it's all about converging all this, making them meet somewhere or feeding each other, but not like to be over optimistic saying one solution gotta fit everything, but at the same time not to kind of neglect the kind of conversion that could happen between all these methodologies and all these tools together, and the smart company will be able to leverage all of them toward the same goal, I guess.
Yeah. Sure. Yes, I think there is a question.
In the back, Greg.
All right, we'll make this the last one, and then we'll switch over.
Hi, maybe a simple practical question.
Yes.
How would I make this tool interact with MS Project? Is it possible, say, in the runtime for a milestone in Project to trigger something here?
Okay, so it is not out of the box. This is, it has to be like a custom thing. So I'm not familiar with MS Project, but if MS Project can kind of publish some kind of event out, or publish some message out, or write to some location where an event or a trigger can be generated, then that process is capable of listening to different kind of events, and we have a very sophisticated set of event listeners called catch events that can catch that event and then change the flow of the process or update the status of the process. So it has to be, pardon? The MS project is not already built in, no.
But it may be actually simple given what MS Project could do on, on the output side, right? Right. Okay. Great.
All right, great. We get a nice round of applause for Mira.
Thank you.
We're going to have a 1-minute switch over here, and part 3 of today's workshop is we're going to come back to Dan Tortorici, and we've encapsulated a lot of BPM best practices and customer success stories, which we always get a lot of requests